Christian, a real true Christian, or you are a conservative, Stephanie White said you are not welcome to
watch. A coach stood in front of reporters and used the word unacceptable 3 times in under a minute.
I gotta tell you,
nobody in that room expected it to become the center of a week-long fight about who the real fans of the league even are. Here's what actually happened in order, because the order matters more than the outrage does. On June 22, 2026, the Indiana Fever hosted the Phoenix Mercury. In a scramble for a loose ball, Mercury forward Alyssa Thomas made contact with Caitlin Clark's throat area. The league reviewed it, upgraded the play to a flagrant foul 2, and suspended Thomas for 1 game. That part isn't in dispute. It's on the official record. What happened next is where 2 different stories start running in parallel. Thomas said publicly that after the play, she and her family were hit with death threats and racial slurs online. She said she felt like she and her teammates were being painted unfairly. That's her account, and it's been reported by multiple outlets without contradiction. At almost the same time, Clark went down with a back injury and missed several games.
I did a video on the Matrix and Road show yesterday. That boycott, that game had 1 million less views, 1 million less viewers than the very last CBS game before it. The game that people said,
that injury mattered for a second reason.
Fans are really going to
Back
tune
in
out.
May, weeks before any of this, fans were
game,
already frustrated with head coach Stephanie White over how the team handled Clark's injury reporting. The league had actually warned the Fever after Clark wasn't properly listed on an injury report before a game she ended up missing. So when people talk about the boycott, they're often folding 2 separate controversies into one: a May injury reporting dispute and a late June incident involving Thomas. Different triggers, same growing frustration. By the time Thomas spoke publicly about the harassment she'd received, the pressure on the Fever organization had already been building for a month. This wasn't a single spark. It was a fuse that had been lit twice. And that's exactly the moment Stephanie White decided to say something. Before we get to what people say White meant, here's what she actually said, because those 2 things ended up being very different by the time the story finished traveling around the internet. On July 1st, White opened a press conference by addressing the harassment directed at Thomas.
Fever, and your coach gave the middle finger to millions of new viewers and fans and merchandise buyers, etc., etc.
According to the Chicago Sun-Times and Yahoo Sports, both of which captured her remarks, she called the situation absolutely unacceptable and said the league had seen a rise in toxicity, racism, and homophobia. She argued that most of that behavior wasn't coming from real WNBA or Fever fans. She framed it as people using the league and its players to push what she called divisive agendas. She also said criticism and a love-hate relationship between fans and players comes with the territory. Her closing line was simple: "It's not hard to not be a jerk." That's the full shape of what she said. No political party, no religion, no specific fan group named. Here's the part that got left out of a lot of the coverage that followed. Some conservative commentary outlets and reaction channels picked up her remarks and reframed them as a direct shot at Christian and conservative fans specifically. That framing spread fast across social media and reaction videos. But it's a characterization added after the fact by commentators. It does not appear anywhere in White's actual quoted remarks.
Yeah, right there. Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell have all made the team as all-stars right here. Let's see this little video that the Fever put up.
That distinction matters because once a headline says a coach attacked Christian fans, a huge number of people will react to the headline and never hear the original quote. That's not a hypothetical. It's exactly what played out here. Not everyone in the league pushed back on White. Elizabeth Williams, a veteran voice with the Players Union, was asked about the comments and largely agreed with the substance. She noted that plenty of the harassment comes from people who've never watched us play and built assumptions about the players without ever engaging with the sport. So you have a real, on-the-record statement about online harassment. And you have a viral reinterpretation of that statement that a large chunk of the internet reacted to instead. Two different stories, one press conference. And the fans reacting to the second version were not staying quiet. Once the reframed version of White's comments started circulating, the reaction wasn't subtle. Fan comments under the Fever's own social posts, including posts celebrating Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Kelsey Mitchell as all-stars, were frequently dominated by calls to fire White or trade Clark elsewhere. Some fans posted screenshots of game tickets, hotel bookings, and Fever merchandise, arguing they were real paying customers who felt dismissed. Others said outright they were done watching until something changed. None of that is speculation. It's a documented pattern across the team's social channels through late June and into July. Mitzi, if any part of this timeline surprised you, the fact that two separate controversies got merged into one story, or that a quote got reframed before most people ever heard the original, that's exactly the kind of thing worth subscribing for. More breakdowns like this are coming. Here's where it gets harder to pin down though. One figure that circulated widely claimed the Fever's franchise valuation dropped $150 million in the wake of the controversy. That number traces back to a single sports outlet's report. It hasn't been independently corroborated by major sports business sources, and no verified valuation data or team statement backs it up. That doesn't mean fan anger wasn't real. It clearly was. It means the specific dollar figure attached to it should be treated as unverified, not confirmed fact. So the boycott sentiment itself is well documented. Screenshots, comments, public statements from fans saying they're finished with the team. That part happened in plain view and continues to shape the conversation around the Fever. What's much less clear is whether that sentiment actually translated into the kind of financial and viewership damage some corners of the internet claimed it did. That's the next question. And the answer is not what the loudest version of this story wants you to believe. If a boycott is working, there's one place it has to show up: the television numbers. So let's actually look at them. According to Nielsen data reported by CBS Sports and tracked independently by Sports Media Watch, a Fever Liberty game on CBS in early June drew 2.557 million viewers, up 33% from the same broadcast window the year before, and the second most watched WNBA game on any network since 2000. That game happened before the Thomas incident and White's press conference, but it set the baseline for what the season already looked like. After the controversy, the pattern didn't reverse. A mid-June Fever game on cable's USA network hit 1 million viewers, the first time a WNBA cable broadcast had cracked that number in years, and the largest cable audience of the season. The Fever season opener on ABC had already drawn 2.49 million viewers, the fourth largest WNBA audience of any kind since 2000. There is one specific claim worth addressing directly because it's shown up in reaction content, that a post-controversy broadcast drew roughly 1 million fewer viewers than the previous CBS game. That specific comparison isn't reflected in the broader ratings tracking available from Sports Media Watch or CBS. The season-long trend for Fever broadcasts has generally moved upward, not down, even through the weeks this controversy was unfolding. None of this means individual fans weren't skipping games. Plenty said they were, and there's no way to verify or disprove any single person's decision not to watch. What it does mean is that the aggregate national television numbers, the actual measurable signal, don't show the kind of collapse the boycott is working narrative described. That's an uncomfortable gap for a story built entirely around outrage. The anger was real. The measurable impact, at least in the data available so far, wasn't what a lot of people online said it was. And that gap gets even wider once you look at what happened to the rumor mill next. By early July, the story had drifted so far from its original source that it produced something with no basis at all. A rumor that Stephanie White was resigning as Fever head coach. Fact-checkers traced it back and found nothing behind it. No team statement, no on-the-record confirmation, no primary source of any kind. Outlets including USA Today and ESPN explicitly debunked the claim, and it appears to have originated from fabricated posts rather than any actual reporting. As of the most recent coverage, White remains the Fever's head coach, and the team sits at 11-8, inside the playoff picture for the season. One more thing got folded into this story that probably shouldn't have been. Around the same time, the Fever chose not to match a rival offer for a developmental roster player and let her leave for the Las Vegas Aces. Some coverage lumped that into the broader Fever and chaos narrative. But by White's own explanation, it came down to the team simply not having room to open a standard roster spot, a routine roster decision, not a symptom of some larger organizational crisis. So here's where all of this actually lands. A real incident happened involving Alyssa Thomas and Caitlin Clark. A real coach made a real statement about online harassment. That statement got reframed into something she didn't say, and that reframed version is what a huge number of people reacted to. Real fans expressed real frustration, some of it stretching back to a separate injury reporting dispute in May. And then, layered on top of all of that, came a viewership collapse that the actual ratings data doesn't support, a valuation figure that isn't independently confirmed, and a resignation rumor that turned out to be entirely fabricated. The lesson isn't that nothing happened here. Plenty did. The lesson is that by the time a story like this reaches your feed, it's usually gone through several rounds of reframing, and the version that spreads fastest is rarely the one closest to what was actually said and actually measured. If the Fever situation develops further, that's a story worth coming back to. Just maybe go to the source next time before deciding what actually happened. This video is for informational purposes only, based on publicly reported sports news. Fast-moving stories can change. Check current sources for the latest developments. A rumor spread fast enough this week that fact-checkers had to step in, that Stephanie White was resigning as head coach of the Indiana Fever. It wasn't true. It came from fabricated posts, and every outlet that traced it back found nothing behind it. But the rumor didn't come from nowhere. It grew out of a real, weeks-long controversy that actually did happen. Here's what's actually documented and where the story gets murkier. The incident that started it. On June 22, 2026, during a Fever and Mercury game, Phoenix's Alyssa Thomas made contact with Caitlin Clark's throat during a scramble for a loose ball. The WNBA reviewed the play, upgraded it to a flagrant foul 2, and suspended Thomas for 1 game. Thomas has said publicly that afterward, she and her family received death threats and racial slurs online, and that she felt she and her teammates were being unfairly characterized. Clark also went down with a back injury around the same stretch and missed multiple games, which matters later in this story because it fed a separate, earlier round of fan frustration and may tied to how the Fever handled her injury reporting. What Stephanie White actually said. On July 1st, White opened a press conference by addressing the harassment directed at Thomas. According to multiple outlets that captured the remarks, including the Chicago Sun-Times and Yahoo Sports, she called the situation absolutely unacceptable, said the league had seen a rise in toxicity, racism, homophobia, and argued that most of it wasn't coming from real WNBA or Fever fans. She framed it as people using the league and its players to push what she called divisive agendas. That's the full shape of the quote. She did not name any political or religious group in that statement. Where the attack on Christians and conservatives framing came from. Some conservative commentary outlets and reaction channels characterized White's remarks as a swipe at Christian and conservative fans specifically. That interpretation is a characterization applied after the fact by commentators. It is not language that appears in White's actual remarks. Worth knowing the difference if you're trying to figure out what actually happened versus how it got repackaged for outrage clicks. The fan backlash, real but not new. Frustration with White didn't start with this press conference. Fans had already been calling for her firing back in May, after Clark was unexpectedly held out of a game and the team was later warned by the league for an injury report issue. That frustration resurfaced and intensified after the Thomas incident, with some fans posting screenshots of tickets, merchandise, and travel bookings to argue they'd been paying customers and were done supporting the team under the current coach. Comments on the Fever's own social posts were frequently dominated by "Fire White" or "Trade Clark" sentiment through late June and into July. That reaction is documented and real. What's less clear is its actual financial impact. One widely shared figure claiming the Fever's valuation dropped $150 million around this period traces back to a single outlet's report, and it's not something independently corroborated across major sports business sources. What the ratings actually show. This is the part that cuts against the boycott is working narrative. Nielsen data reported by CBS Sports and tracked independently by Sports Media Watch shows Fever games have posted some of the biggest WNBA audiences on record this season. A June 6th Fever Liberty game on CBS drew 2.557 million viewers, up 33% year-over-year and the second most watched WNBA broadcast on any network since 2000. Other Fever games this season have similarly ranked among the largest audiences the league has drawn, including on cable, where a mid-June Fever game became the first to crack 1 million viewers on USA Network in years. There have been individual claims, including from at least one commentator, that a specific post-controversy broadcast drew roughly 1 million fewer viewers than a prior CBS game. That specific comparison isn't confirmed in the broader ratings tracking available, and league-wide, the season's audience trend for Fever games has generally been up.